Let it roll off my back.
And we're all rolling, letting it all roll off our back. Hi, everybody. This is Joanne Eisen. I am with Reach the Unlimited. As you all know, we're all flustered because we had all kinds of problems and it wasn't working, but it worked. It just magically fixed itself.
Here we
Uh,
are.
Thank you all for being here. I don't know who's still here, but thank you all for being here and listening to this. Sorry, I'm babbling on right now because I'm trying to stop everything. I would like to welcome my guest who has been so patient and we have endured so much just to get here to the show today. This is Shannon Torrence, right? Did I say that right?
That's
Okay.
right. You got it.
It's like I didn't verify that. And we are going to be talking about life and how life can take its turn. So, Shannon, thank you so much for being patient. We are way late, but we
Me
got
too.
here. So that's what counts.
Yeah. Honestly, it's my new spiritual thing where when stuff happens, I just trust that it's happening because it's just the flow of things and there's a reason.
Yeah.
Maybe my computer would have electrocuted me had we started early. We don't even know. So I just kind of say, Spirit, lead the way. This is all happening. I'm just going to go with it.
Yep. 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 That's
Take a
what we have
Buddhist
to do.
approach. Hmm.
Hi, Marcia. So let's start this conversation though, because we have a really great topic that we want to talk about tonight. So tell everybody a little about yourself. People
Well,
know me.
thank you. Yeah, I know. Well, hi, I'm Shannon Torrance, and I am a person, but I'm also a voice actor,
Hmm.
and I'm now a developing medium and host of a podcast slash YouTube channel called Magic is Real. So, I've been an actor for many years, and I've only recently segued into the spiritual realm of things.
Which is really interesting. I know for me, I'm very intrigued and curious how you took that turn because they're kind of different avenues when you think about
Yes.
acting and
Yes.
doing mediumship. What caused you to decide to go from doing your voice acting into the spiritual realm of life?
Well, for many years, I was working towards being a voice actor for a living, and I was a voiceover for a living
Hmm.
in around 2008. I was doing very well, and then all of a sudden, the economy crashed, and suddenly things just weren't what they used to be. So I
Hmm.
ended up getting a lot of day jobs, temping, babysitting, but I still had acting in mind. But I finally got to the point where I said, I can't pay my bills anymore. I just have to do what
Hmm.
I have to do. So I was very, very unhappy and miserable working in those dead end jobs that weren't getting me anywhere. I don't want to work in corporate America. It's just not me.
Hmm.
And so it was a long haul. I ended up, I was doing all these different jobs. I was working in casting. I was a music booker, all of which I loved.
Hmm.
I was babysitting and I was doing CrossFit and I ended up with adrenal fatigue really badly.
Hmm.
And my boss said, "You're not performing anymore. Something's wrong with you." And I was freelance. It was fine. So I ended up going, well, I'm going to try. I have to quit all my jobs because I can barely walk to the mailbox without shaking. So
Wow.
I had to be in bed. It turned out I
Hmm.
had sleep apnea, which was part of the problem. But I was
Hmm.
also pushing myself too hard, and I wasn't doing what I was meant to be doing.
Hmm.
My body was like, "Yes, you're good at this. You're good at that. These are fun jobs, but where's the abundance? Where's the this isn't your path." So
Hmm.
then I said, well, I'm going to go back to voiceover, try it online. Now they have online casting sites, and I'll just start. I'm going to have to hope that I book something. Well,
Hmm.
within the next, like, probably 5 months, I started to make more money than I'd ever made working 5 jobs at a time.
Hmm.
And I was back in the game, and I was like, oh my gosh, finally, later in life, I'm getting there. I'm finally where I need to be. I'm busy
Hmm.
every day. I'm working myself to the I mean, I loved it, but there was also a fear of lack
Hmm.
in there somewhere where I never said no to a client. If they wanted me, I was like, I'll be right there. I never said, you know what, I'm booked today. How about tomorrow? It
Yeah.
was like because I'd been struggling financially for so long, I was in this lack mentality. So I would work until 10 o'clock at night. I did 40 auditions a day, if you can believe it. Never took a break, never
Hmm.
took vocal rest, just
Hmm.
went. And even if my voice was hurting, I would just be like, well, they want this by tomorrow. I'm going to do it. So eventually, long story short, I ended up with what I didn't know. I started to have reflux, didn't know why. It
Mhm.
turned out I had severe gastritis from an intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which comes from antibiotic use and
Mhm.
that sort of thing. So I was suddenly having spasms in my throat. I couldn't control my voice. It was like this. I didn't know why.
Oh man.
So just at the peak of my career,
Yeah.
suddenly I remember when it first started, I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? And someone gave me a script and said, it's just one line. And I couldn't read the line. I was like, coming. It was like all my air was just coming out because my vocal cords weren't, they were doing this instead
Mhm.
of closing
Mhm.
normally. And so
Mhm.
this led to a million doctors and misdiagnoses. I was with an HMO, and it turned out that they didn't know for 2 years I had SIBO, which is the name for it. But I was dealing with, I lost so much weight, I couldn't talk. So I went to a few voice therapists, and one of them
Mhm.
said to me, you just can't do voiceover anymore. And you're going to have to get a side job. She said, probably like be an accountant or something. And I was so depressed. She's like, your voice is never going to be the same. It's, you're done. Like that's your career. And I was like, but
Mhm.
I only got 3 years. I worked my life for this, and this is all I get. And I felt so defeated. I was so depressed, and I couldn't eat solid food. So I was 102 pounds, severely depressed. People didn't understand. People around me
Mhm.
were like, okay, enough
Mhm.
already. Like, we don't want to hear it anymore. And I was really struggling with, what am I going to do now? Like, I don't have another thing I want to do. This is what I worked for. And someone said to me, well, if you could do anything else other than voiceover, what would it be? I said, nothing. I'd be a psychic medium. But I said, but dead people aren't talking to me. So that's not going to happen. I had been obsessed with the Long Island
Mhm.
Medium and
Mhm.
watching those shows, but I was under the impression that you had to be born with this gift, that
Mhm.
either you had it or you didn't, and that was that. And I'll come around to how I started doing it, but even recently my mediumship mentor said to me, "But why did you want to be a medium?" I said, "I don't know. I just wanted to. It just felt like something." He said, "Well, then that's because you're a medium. That's why you felt called to do it." I wasn't analyzing why. I just wanted
Yeah.
to have that connection with the spiritual world, have that connection with another person, bring hope, healing, service, not because I wanted to be famous. I know that most mediums are not.
Mhm.
And so my vocal coach, Alyssa Weinzimmer, I'm going to give her a shout out because she's fantastic. She had gone through the same thing, wanted to
Mhm.
sing on Broadway, ended up with muscle tension dysphonia, which is what I had. And she is a very spiritual person. And she said to me, all
Mhm.
right, before we even really get into the mechanics, you need to heal your body. And I want you to do yoga. I want you to meditate. I want you to read The Power of Now. You need to calm your nervous system. Because what had
Mhm.
happened is that my muscles started to tense to protect my vocal cords. And
Yeah.
it felt like my throat was in a vice and I could barely speak. And so I started delving into spiritual stuff, self help books, because I was so depressed that I didn't want to live anymore. And I wasn't going to do something about it. I just had nothing left to live for, I
Mhm.
felt, because that
Mhm.
everything I wanted was, I just felt like,
Yeah.
what now? I'm going to go temp again. And so I started reading books,
Mhm.
and then I read John Holland's book,
Mhm.
Famous Medium.
Mhm.
And in his book, he said, you don't anyone is all we're all mediums, you just have to train. Then I
Mhm.
read Teresa Caputo's book, and she's like, do you think I just woke up doing this? No, she's like, I studied. She's like, and even after like years, my teacher was like, you're ready, and I was like, no, I'm not ready. So yeah, I started to go, wait, I can learn this. And so I began to study with mediums I had been to. I started doing mediumship circles on Zoom, mainly because
Mhm.
it was actually, at first it was in person, then it became Zoom during COVID. But
Mhm.
I just threw myself into, didn't know why. I just wanted to read every book about near death experiences, every book I could get my hands on mediumship, doing meditation every day, doing yoga. And then I studied with great mediums, but then I also had been watching, I'd watched every episode of Monica the Medium, which is another reality show. And
Mhm.
I was on her mailing list. So she said, I'm teaching a class. And I was like, look, I'm not working and I don't really have the money, but I'm putting this on a credit card because I love her. If there's anyone I really want to study with, it's her. And her class just took me to a different level. I had been doing
Mhm.
some practice readings on the side. I had been practicing, but it was like every beginning medium, you read, but you're just learning. So you're just
Yeah.
throwing spaghetti to see what sticks.
Yeah.
You go, okay, you want me to tell you what I'm seeing? I'm seeing bananas. I'm
Mhm.
seeing rats. And they're like, nope. And then but then when you start to learn that, oh wait, but why do I see someone here that, was into bowling, and they start to say yes, yes, and then you get this feeling that feels different. You learn to
Mhm.
distinguish, as you know, between what's your thought and what's spirit thought, and it
Mhm.
takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of faith. But one thing that Monica said to us in class, suddenly, you know how like sometimes you're struggling in a subject, perhaps in high school, and suddenly your teacher just says
Mhm.
one thing that like it
Mhm.
clicks for you. She said that if you set the intention to communicate with spirit's there. You don't
Mhm.
have that. If you feel blocked, you're blocking yourself with ego, with self-doubt, with worry, with perfectionism. If you just trust that spirit's there and they want to communicate with you, they're there. You
Mhm.
really don't have to do, all you have to do is listen.
Mhm.
Just trust. And all of a sudden, like I was thinking, oh gosh, I'm the worst in class. I'm the one who's not the best in class. And then by the final class, I was reading people and they were actually validating everything I was saying. And I was saying, oh my gosh, that was the only shift. It was just get out of your way. Get out of the way. And um and we'll go into more detail, but I'll just also say that before COVID, I had wanted to start a podcast. That was something I had been working on. But then I lost my voice. And
Oh wow.
it was right when I was like, I'm going to do a podcast for recovering addicts because I am a recovering, not substance addict, but what they call sex and love addict, which is basically low self esteem. My thing was
Mhm.
dating unavailable people.
Mhm.
If someone was available, I would push them away. And then if someone was unavailable and couldn't meet my needs, I would just fixate on them. So, um, I feel very recovered in that area, and I really wanted to help people know that this is not something to be ashamed about.
Mhm.
We need to learn to love ourselves. And I wanted to have people on that could tell their stories of how they were like me at rock bottom, where I was
Mhm.
definitely borderline suicidal during my addiction of just not being able to find peace
Mhm.
and self love. So I was looking everywhere for it. And because no one can fulfill your needs but yourself and God,
Yeah.
your relationship with spirit or God,
Mhm.
I was constantly falling on my face looking for other people to make me feel okay. So I had
Mhm.
a drive to do something service oriented, but then
Mhm.
I lost my voice. And then I just gave up. I didn't have the drive anymore. I didn't want to do it. So when COVID hit, it was like, I've always wanted to do this, but I actually have to say that at this point in my life, I'm kind of done talking about that chapter in my life. Like, I'm happy to be of service to anyone who has questions about it, which is why I always put it out there. Um, but I really am really interested in the spirit world and mediums and near death experiencers. And I kept coming up with those excuses. Well, people
Mhm.
are already doing that. Why, if I do it, who's going to listen and who's going to say yes? I don't have any followers. And well, the production level is not going to be good enough. And I finally just said, you know what? Stop. Just do it. Just sit
Mhm.
down, schedule someone. A medium, Susan Schuler. She's fantastic. Just get her on. And she was nice enough as one of my teachers to say, I'll do it, to kind of just get the ball rolling. And then now the podcast is my passion.
Mhm.
Excuse me, I just choked on my own spit. My passion. It has brought together meeting people like you. It's a whole network of people. People now reach out to me. I'm getting asked to meet up with other people to talk about spiritual stuff. And I'm no expert, and neither, none of us are. but have
And you
these
just said, neither am
conversations.
I get it.
Yeah.
We're
But
not experts.
no, but it's like it
Yeah,
offers so much hope and inspiration and magic
exactly.
into our lives to talk about them. So that's my very long winded answer to your question.
There was so much in that to unpack. And I have to say, my journey in starting this show was the same way. It was just one day, it was like, how can I be of service? What do I really have passion for? And starting the show is what hit me. And I haven't turned back since. And like you, it was like a cell phone, a friend, and Facebook is how we
Yes.
started. And I've progressed to up level some as I've been on my journey, but clearly, we still have technical problems as we have experienced today. But the interesting thing is, I don't know that we ever know. Well, we know we don't know what direction we're going, but your story really shows how we can think we're going to have a path, but we're going to take another path ultimately. We don't know where it's going to end, right? I feel like I kind of went into mediumship and, it wasn't something I had thought about or even thought about doing. It was just a tap on my shoulder. But this was a journey that you took from going from something you really had passion for, which is interesting that you started your podcast, and yet you go into the mediumship. So it's really, I feel like a tale of how spirit works with us, and we never know what our next step was going to be. But one of the things I'd like to go back to, that is one of them, but this one is the really big one that I heard from you, was a part of our journey as we're going forward is feeling like we have to be perfect, right? Or feeling like we have to be good at something before we can do it. And I think the biggest catch in that is we're never going to be perfect. And so you took that call to start your podcast, even though you've had this voice issue and you have this other direction, and it's become a passion. So I really hope people can really understand that we don't have to be perfect and we're not going to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's so common. I think it's common for all human beings,
Mhm,
especially people, performers, but especially
mhm,
women. And I don't know why that is, especially women. I think it's the way we're raised
mhm. Our
unintentionally,
society.
maybe not, or we were maybe, when we were younger. That
Mhm,
it's just like you have to be nice, you have to get good grades, you just have to kind of
mhm,
be, you have to fall in line. And I think um, it's so easy to be so hard on ourselves as
mhm,
well. Um, just as human beings, there's so much expectation, and
mhm.
um, well, especially today, there's so much content out there. I mean, that's why podcasts are blowing up during COVID, because everyone's like, well, I don't have a job now. I may as well do something. And what can I do with myself? And
Right.
there's so much great content. There's so many people
Mhm,
that are so talented. There's so many
mhm,
people that have a voice. I could listen to podcasts all day long, and I know there are thousands I haven't even become aware of and I
mhm,
wouldn't have time for. But there's definitely, for me, I've always been careful, and for some, as a
mhm,
sensitive, I guess. I think this is where I'm going with this.
mhm,
As an HSP, which is a highly sensitive person, for those of you
mhm.
who don't know that term. Um, I was so highly sensitive that as a child, I had a psychologist when I was 2 years old and 3 years old, because I
Wow.
was elective mute, because I was very, very self conscious and very
Mhm,
sensitive, to the point where they actually told my mom I might be autistic, because just noises, everything is so loud and so
mhm,
overwhelming that I just couldn't
mhm,
handle it. So I stopped speaking the way that a child says, like, you can't see me. It was like I wanted to be
mhm,
invisible, which is funny that
mhm.
now I'm an actor and I'm a host,
That is
because
ironic.
it's making up for lost time. I obviously
Mhm.
have no problem speaking now, but I
Yeah.
was silent for 2 years, I think it was. I mean, from
Mhm,
at least age 3 to 5, that I'm positive about.
mhm,
And because of that, I just learned to stay very safe. I was very, very worried about making mistakes. I was I would cry. I remember bringing home like a B on on a math was not my thing, and I struggled. And my mom's like, "Why are you sobbing? Did we put pressure on you?" She said, I hope you never felt pressure from us." And it was me. Like, I just needed to be perfect, or I would freak out. And if I made a mistake, I would ruminate about it for years. like years I could go, oh God, that thing I said in, 1982. It's like, it's so ridiculous, but there's also that element of most artists, especially, are sensitive.
Hmm.
And so, and we're afraid to be vulnerable and be seen.
Hmm.
And I wanted to do a podcast about sex and love addiction specifically in the
Hmm.
beginning because
Hmm.
I'm like, I want to stop feeling like there should not be people. I don't want people to feel ashamed of these things. I don't want it to be a stigma. And I think we're just human. We just want love. We just want acceptance and validation. And so some of us have intimacy problems with or use people to make us feel better.
Hmm.
And the same thing with saying, "Hey, I'm a medium." Even the other day my mom was like, "You probably shouldn't really just tell everyone that." And I'm like, "Listen, I am so happy on this path. I don't care. For the first time in my life, I do not care what people think of me in this. If they know me, they know that I'm not crazy. I'm proud of it. I know that not everybody believes it. I know there are people who are offended by it because it
Hmm.
goes against their beliefs. I know people think I'm if at best that don't believe in this stuff probably think like, "Oh, she's just it's like religion is the opiate of the people." Like it's isn't that nice to have that belief, but then I don't care because I know the truth. The people that I'm attracting are like-minded. And
Hmm.
honestly, I'm like, if it's not for you, it's not for you. I don't care. And if you actually don't want to be my friend or it doesn't matter, then we're not meant to be in each other's circle anyway. I only want people around me that are not on the same wavelength. You don't have to be spiritual, but you have to at least just be accepting of, hey, that's cool. That's your thing. And it's amazing to follow your bliss. And actually, for someone who's so self-critical, I thought I'd be like, oh God, I put it out there. And then I'm like, I don't do that. I don't know why. I just feel very comfortable publicly saying all of this personal stuff because I'm like, who cares? I'm a human being. It doesn't matter.
Well, don't
It's
you feel like, we go through this journey of transformation and understanding? Like I remember when you kept on talking about loud, for some reason that's sticking in my head. But when I first started coming awake and going into what I'm really here for, I remember telling people it's just so loud. And I do think that when we're going along with society and the way that it's going, we just kind of go into mute or silence or, just going with the flow. We're not really paying attention to anything, whether it be whether we're happy or doing what we really want to do or making choices that we really want to make. We're just kind of going with the flow. Where if you start hitting that friction where you're going, wait a minute, there's something not right here. I want to actually think for myself. Don't you feel like that's a part too? I feel like in any kind of transformation, that's where you're starting to hear a lot of other stuff that's going on. And it can cause you to to feel like you're crazy when you're going through that. So I thought for me,
yeah.
that was an experience that I've had.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that this is specifically that, but I think I am someone who lets people's opinions
Hmm.
get to me or make me change.
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to be I can go from one end of the pendulum to the other
Hmm.
depending on who I'm speaking with because I'll say, "Oh, that makes sense. Oh, actually I understand your side too." I have
Hmm.
trouble being this is where I stand and I change my mind all the time, but
Hmm.
even I don't even it's even with like mediumship, which
Hmm.
it's such an abstract thing and I
Yes.
can't even promise you that what I'm doing is channeling spirit. I believe it 100%. The people that have written me I've gotten emails saying I know that you're just starting, but I want you to know that this has healed me or this healed my mom. And I
Hmm.
just need you to know that what you're doing is important and it matters. And I can validate everything you said. I believe that it's working. I, I don't know. I can't tell you with 100% certainty that that's what's happening. And I'm not picking up on something psychic or some kind of energy um, because it's an abstract thing. I can't prove it
Hmm.
other than I can give someone a reading and they can say that all resonated with me.
Hmm.
But because there's no proof, there will be people that will say, well, you're just reading body language. Or when people have a near death experience, it's just brain chemicals on overdrive. It's just DMT being released from the brain in one big, but they didn't, but really, then you just die. And people can have all kinds of thoughts. Now, it doesn't sway me because I've seen enough
Mhm.
evidence to believe it. But I
Mhm.
don't even want to hear that stuff anymore because I'm like, it's not useful to me. Because even if I were wrong and I don't believe I am, I can tell you I believe this 100%. But even if it turns out I'm wrong and this has all been somehow I did a psychological mind trick on all my sitters and just got really lucky with what I saw and heard, and it's all coincidences and not synchronicities. Even if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, I'd rather not know because I mean, life is hard. And so
Yeah,
to
that's hard.
me, it's beautiful to believe that this is not all there is. This is literally just Earth School. We're
It's
just here to
interesting.
learn.
Yeah, we
Go
are.
ahead.
It's interesting what you're saying about, because when we're doing readings, I mean, there are times where we could feel like this is just insane. This is
Yes.
just insanity at its best. But when you start strangers that you don't even know and you start speaking to them about their loved one in evidential ways that there's no way you could know about it, there's no way I'm going to know that your father used to go to the lake and he would fish every Sunday at 12 o'clock, and that he would be there for exactly an hour, then he would pick up all of his stuff and go to a coffee shop, have a latte, and come home with biscuits for everybody. There's
Right.
no way that I'm going to be able to gather that information and say, I made all that up or it's wrong. So for me, I guess you go through that process, right, as you go through your training and your experiences of that doubt, and maybe this isn't real, or how could this be happening? But you get to that point where you're like, I don't really care what you think,
Yeah.
because like you said, I know for a fact that I'm pulling information that there's no way I can know. And it touches, like, I haven't had this often, but I was doing a practice with someone last night and they brought through a friend for me that I dearly loved and miss. And all he had to say was two things to me: beach and blanket. He didn't have to fill in the blanks. He didn't have to do anything else. As soon as he said that, along with other things that he said, I knew concretely he had my friend there. And he brought healing and tears to me because I knew that she was validating and letting me know that she is with me and that she's here. You can't take that kind of love and joy and compassion that we feel when we're doing mediumship. You cannot put a price on that, really, and you can't take that from somebody.
Absolutely. It's like, to me, this means more to me than anything. If
Mm-hmm.
if my partner didn't support me in it,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, sorry, this is what I choose. Not because
Yeah.
I love it more than well, it's because it's so important to me and it is my life's mission at
Mm-hmm.
this point.
Mm-hmm.
I still do voiceover, but I do have strain and it's hard. It's
Mm-hmm.
I do it still. I'm able to perform, but I can't do the volume that I used to do. I get hoarse very easily. I get tired very
Mm-hmm.
easily. So I'm still fortunate in that I can still do it. I mean, you can hear that I can speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm able to come through for my clients, but it's not something I can do 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I love it. But if I had to choose, if I had to, and I love acting so much and I know I'm
Mm-hmm.
good at it and I enjoy it very much, if someone gave me a choice, I would choose being a medium because
Mm-hmm.
that feels so, I mean, being an
Mm-hmm.
actor is so much fun and getting to share your personality is amazing, but being able to heal somebody and help heal somebody, help them heal themselves, if being
Mm-hmm.
able to provide evidence that this isn't all there is, and to give somebody in grief just that realization that your loved
Mm-hmm.
one really is here. And that to me is like the ultimate act of
Mm-hmm.
service, and to give
Absolutely.
someone hope because it's hard. And so that connection, also doing the readings, every single reading I have, we set it for an hour and we end up like 3 hours later. Oh my gosh, we got to go because I'm not charging, but the
Yeah.
amount of time
Mm-hmm.
I end up meeting the most beautiful people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're
I
talking about
agree.
intimate stuff. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
bond. It's such
Mm-hmm.
a beautiful connection to have with somebody, and such a personal thing. Like there's nothing else I would want to do if like if I had to choose, if I had to do
Right.
one thing and one thing only.
That's a tough one, because I don't know that we're built to only do one
I
thing. I
know.
think very few people are built to only do one thing. But the other thing that I want to really touch on, because it's really important to touch on it, is I think in our society we're being taught that we have to be tough and strong and we can't be vulnerable and imperfect. And especially if you had parents that were very much strict and legalistic, and you had to do things, the way that they wanted you to do it. And then you become very more rigid to being able to explore and actually make mistakes, like you were talking about, right? And the distress that would cause. And I'm really seeing that more and more, that we need to do more of that, where we're showing our vulnerability. Like, we had all that time we were trying to figure out how to get on, and we couldn't solve the issue or have tech support and trying to find the solution. And all of a sudden it just started again. It shows that nothing in life is ever going to be perfect. And you went through a journey where you had an addiction and said, this is what I have to face. And how many people can really lose what you love to do, go through all of these other jobs and not really know where you're going, come into mediumship, and then also be able to face that? That's a lot of change that you took on in your life and you faced.
Yeah, and I remember when I lost my voice, and I really couldn't even talk casually.
Mm-hmm.
I was babysitting, and I couldn't even sing or read to the child. It was like
Mm-hmm.
I had this baby, and I'm like, I can't even say twinkle twinkle to the baby, and I was so depressed because I was like, my voice is like, that's how I express, and not even just my job. It's how I make money. It's how I express myself. It's how we all express ourselves.
Yeah, we do.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
even if you're unable to speak, then you have sign language if you know it. But like, we need to connect. We need to communicate with others. And I was so depressed. Um, and I remember thinking, honestly, the reason I didn't want to live, which the only, I mean, I didn't want, I wouldn't have done anything about it because I wouldn't hurt anybody. But it was like, I just don't, there's literally nothing else I want to do. There's nothing else I want to do than act. This is what this is my favorite job. I always said I wanted a job that I didn't have to go to, and I have it. I can work in pajamas from my home and I make good money. And I'm, and I enjoy it. And
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine what I was going to do instead. I was like, and what I found, because I had to, was I'm a thrift addict. I did not know this. Oh, I started reselling. I started becoming a reseller online,
Mm-hmm.
selling used clothes or new with tags clothes, but
Mm-hmm.
going to the thrift outlets, like going to Goodwill and going to the Goodwill
Mm-hmm.
outlets and selling things. And I was like, who knew that I love I'm not even a fashion person. I just love to find a deal and to be able to say, "Oh, I found this for $3 and I just sold it for $40." Like, how fun
Uh,
is that? And the
yeah.
work I did was seeking that thing out and
Mm-hmm.
getting it out in the world. So I was like, I could do this forever. At the time, I was like, this is so much fun. Then
Mm-hmm.
I started be doing mediumship and was like, oh my gosh, I love doing this. And then I'm like, and I have started this YouTube podcast, and I was like, oh, I want to do this every day. So now I can do, and I still babysit. I'm great with kids. I love
Mm-hmm.
babies. I don't want any of my own, but I'm great at it. I'm great at
Mm-hmm.
it in small doses when I have energy and I don't have to be up all night with them. So
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of found like there's a million things I love to do.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's to the point where, my partner was like, you know, he said, you actually need to do less. Like, you've got too many things going on. And then I was like, and I'm starting a voiceover coaching thing with my friend. And he was like, but you can't do 20 things because you're not even like, he's like, I never see you because you're always like, gotta go. He makes fun of the fact that he said, what now? You're going to go churn the butter, milk the cow? What else do you have to do today? It's 10 o'clock and I'm going, I just have to do one more thing. And he's like, you're never stopping. So, you know, I have to work on that. But I also am like, even if I never had voiceover again, I mean,
Yeah.
I would miss it, but I'm like, you know what? I love this new chapter in my life, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's exactly where I was meant to be. It's even though at the time I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why is this happening to me?
Well, that's a question a lot of us ask, right? Why is this happening to me? And that's one of the reasons that we go wrong, is because life isn't happening to you. It's happening for you because you were able then to see. And I want to go back to, because I think all of us hit that time in life where we feel like, I want to give up. I'm done. I don't know where to go. I don't know what direction to turn. We all face that. And it's the fact that you kept on going forward. You kept on looking. Even if you didn't know, you kept on looking. And I feel like that is an important message, because we will always find another way. We'll find another direction to go, or a passion or a love. Like you were saying, you have all of these passions now that, my daughter used to do that. She would go to Lululemon, the
Uh-huh.
outlets, and then she would
Yeah.
buy something for like $10 and she would sell it for like
Sell it.
80. It was a
Yeah.
great, when she was
So
putting
fun.
herself through college, that worked really well for her. So you
Yeah.
find creative ways to make your life better or to change it, because every step that you take forward is another step to where you're going to go. And if we can remember that we're in a lull at a time, or we're at the height of our whatever we're doing at that moment, there's always going to be another thing. There's always going to be something else that we can go to or strive to.
Yeah. I mean, in my addict days, I would be some relationship wouldn't work out. Of course it wouldn't
Hmm.
work out because I didn't love myself. And so I wasn't
Hmm.
able to show up and be vulnerable
Hmm.
and set boundaries and say,
Hmm.
if you're not ready to, if you're not ready to love me, then we're not doing this.
Right.
Even in that time, I remember that somebody that I really liked a lot, I just decided, I was like, no, but he's the one, like he's the one.
Hmm.
And I kept seeing it going in that direction, and then it wouldn't, and then I'd see it happening again. And he came back into my life after a long time, and I was like, "No, it's happening. He's finally ready. Like he's finally available. We're finally gonna do this." And then like a month later, he was like, "I'm just not ready for this. I just got out of a relationship." And that moment, I read this book my uncle had given me. I think it was The Way of
Hmm.
Zen. And one thing, it was talking about Buddhism and how I was so I'm like, come on, but I wanted this to work out. Like I really saw it in my mind's eye. And the book said,
Hmm.
when something happens that you are just you can't control, just say to yourself, this is what's happening right now.
Hmm.
This is just what's happening right now. And I was like, all right, I surrender to the fact that he doesn't want to be in a relationship with me. And this isn't going to be what I thought it was. And it's so funny because it's like it wasn't meant. Now I can see he's a lovely person. He's a great,
Hmm.
great person. And he's married with a kid, and I'm in a, happy relationship after 8 years. And it's like we weren't the right people for each other. It
Hmm.
wasn't meant to be. He's a really nice guy. He's a really lovely person. We weren't, it wasn't our destiny to be together. We found
Hmm.
people that were more suited, but also the bigger thing is that for me, I needed more spiritual growth. I needed more
Hmm.
work. I had to do more work on myself so that it wasn't a relationship of what can he bring into my life. It's what can I offer, and how can I be fine with myself no matter who. If someone walks out the door right now, I mean, if my partner walks out the door, yes, grief, normal grief. I'm totally strong and I can be alone. Like I
Hmm.
feel I love my life. I love who I am with all my quirks and faults, and I could list a
Hmm.
thousand of them. But I don't need a relationship. I'm choosing the relationship.
Yes.
There's a
That is a
beauty in
big
it.
statement. That is because I
Yeah.
feel like we go into relationships because we want to heal something or feel something, or, not be alone or not face something. But if we can go into a relationship being whole as a person, not needing from that person or not expecting from that person, then that's what makes a good relationship, because you're independently living together, not
Yeah.
not living for each other. You're living with each other, which is a big difference in energy.
It is. And it's the same thing I think with now when something happens, like you said, okay, we were having
Hmm.
this technical issue. I don't get rattled anymore. I mean, before I would
Hmm.
have been like so angry and like my body would be all worked up. And now I just I've trying to go, this is just what's happening right now. And it
Hmm.
always works out.
It
What
does.
I've learned is like, relax. It's like, so you're late. What you can't change it. Just go with the flow. Let it happen. You can't change it. So just relax. And usually what happens is, as we were saying, yeah, I couldn't believe I was like, you're giving me a vocal disorder. First, you put me here and you give me this gift of being able to perform using my
Hmm.
voice, and then it's
Hmm.
gone. That's not
Hmm.
fair. What was the point of all that? And the
Hmm.
point was I had it to have a dark night of the soul
Hmm.
and I will add one thing that I've said this in many interviews, but so I feel like a broken record, but not I haven't said it here. When I was around 14, I turned off the light in my bedroom, and before I even closed my eyes, a big blue orb appeared right above my bed. And it
Hmm.
was the brightest blue electric blue thing I've ever seen in my life. And I always say this, it was in the 80s. So there was no cell phone. There was nothing that would generate a
Mhm.
light like that. Plus it was this big. It looked like Tinkerbell. It looked at me curiously. It was just a ball of light, and it zipped across my room like several times.
Mhm.
And then I screamed because I just didn't know what it was. And it just flew back up in the sky and disappeared. And by that time, I'd screamed for my mom, and then it disappeared. Well, again, at the time, I was more of an atheist. I was just so I don't even know how I just was like, I don't know what that was. Maybe it was a hologram. I don't even know. Well, then years later, I was working in casting, and we were working on some paranormal project. We had to find people that were psychics and mediums.
Mhm.
And this was, I don't know, many years later. And it was probably like 7 years ago, and I'm on the phone calling psychics and mediums. Hadn't thought about this psychic world at all, medium world, and I said, "Hey, while I'm on the phone with you, can I ask you something? What was this blue orb?" And the woman was like, "Oh, those were your guardian angels. That was spirit. They were showing themselves to you because they knew that one day you were going to need to look back." And at the time, I didn't know what this meant really. But she said one day they were there to eliminate any self-doubt that you would have regarding
Mhm.
spirituality, that you were going to have a spiritual awakening, and that was your touchstone to remember. If you ever said, "Wait, do I believe in this?" They were saying, "Just remember." I mean, they were also there to say, "We've got you." They wanted to show
Mhm.
themselves to me, but I guess I shut it down by screaming. So um, there was there was two pronged. I don't know what was going on in my life that they decided to show up when they did, and what was kind of what they were there for. But if
Mhm.
nothing else, I keep looking back to it and saying, if I ever doubt myself, then what was that? What
I think
was that?
everybody should think about that because I think we've all had those moments of time where something has happened that's unexplainable, and you kind of dismiss it until you need it. Because when
Yeah.
I had two little kids, and I was with a friend. We were out in the street, and we couldn't get into the car, and there was nobody around. And we were trying to figure out. We didn't have the key. I don't remember what happened to the key. This was like a million years ago, and we couldn't figure it out. And all of a sudden, this gentleman in a trench coat came up and he helped us. And we were so excited, so thankful. We had these little kids, they're screaming, they need to get back in the car. And we turned around and the guy was just gone. And to this day, both of us knew that that was an angel that had come to
Hmm.
help us. And it
Yeah.
took me years to remember that until I needed it at another point in time for courage to be able to see things differently and to be able to have the strength because I changed like you, I think all of us do. We change our entire life at one point. We just go a completely different direction because that's our path, right? We're doing something and we learn from that. And now it's time to go on to do something else. And like you, I didn't have really I just didn't have mediumship in my radar. It wasn't something I thought about religiously. It was something that went against my religious beliefs. And I just got a tap on the shoulder one day. And that was the beginning of my doing mediumship. So we never know what direction
Hmm.
our life's going to go. But what happens is that if we don't listen, eventually we'll be pulled back to that direction because usually it's some kind of life path and there's a purpose for it. But it's so amazing how we just keep evolving as people if we allow that to happen. And it sounds like you've really done that through your process, is just allowed yourself through all the bumps in the roads that you went down to evolve and to be the person that you are today.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. And I remember feeling so hopeless when I was
Mm-hmm.
an addict, and I would so many times. I mean, my poor mom had to fly out to college because I was some some loser had broken up with me, and I didn't even like him to begin with. But then he begged me to be his girlfriend, and then he dumped me and left me for somebody else, and I fell apart and I didn't want to live, and I just couldn't figure out what that was. It wasn't about him. I now know it was
Mm-hmm.
about the feeling of not being lovable, or being rejected.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing about him that was special, but
Mm-hmm.
it was that feeling of abandonment. And so she had to fly out because I was like, I don't want to live anymore. And it was like, and nobody knew. I don't think anyone knew what love addiction was, So I would go through this every breakup where it was like I was at rock bottom. I didn't want to live. Every
Mhm.
time someone would break up with me, I felt like I couldn't go on anymore. And when I look back, who were these? Were just people, like nothing special about them. And but I always say that I'm so glad that I stuck it out
Mhm.
because I mean, I can't even tell you the depth of grief and pain I was in. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to help other people who are
Mhm.
struggling with that because people don't, people who haven't experienced it, my mom just kept saying, but why can't you just stop doing this? Why don't you just not date that person? And I said, it's
Mhm.
like, I can't explain. It feels like someone's ripping my limbs off. Like when someone leaves me, it feels like my heart's being ripped out of my body. It isn't about the person, it's that lack of God to me.
Right.
Like I didn't have
Right.
that and I don't, and to clarify, but I don't mean like the biblical God in the true
Mhm.
sense, just that
Mhm.
God love. I was
Mhm.
missing my connection to my true
Yeah.
self. And
Mhm.
so there was this giant hole and I was in so much pain and I wanted to help other addicts because
Mhm.
I know that pain. And I actually, in a room, once heard a heroin addict say, I've been a meth addict, I've been a heroin addict. And he said, love addiction is more painful than any drug. The withdrawal is the more painful than any drug I've ever withdrawn from, including
Hmm.
heroin. And it's hard to describe if you don't have that thing. So just thinking about if I had given up, there were so many good years left of like these beautiful
Mhm.
adventures and these amazing
Mhm.
people that have come into my life. And
Yeah.
like I would have missed out on so much. And now I feel like I'm middle aged now and this is like my new chapter. This is like, I feel like, Stella got her groove back. Like suddenly it's like, oh, my 20s and 30s were kind of a wash where I really wasted a lot of time in self loathing and not loving myself,
Oh,
not
yeah.
holding boundaries and letting people treat me like crap and allowing people to demean
Yeah.
me. And it's like,
Mhm.
this is my time. And which is, one of the reasons I chose not to have children. I'm like, this is my time now. This is like, I never got to be a happy person until now. And it's
Yeah.
exciting. And I'm like, and there's so much more. And I want to write a book and
Oh,
and I don't know where this is all going, but I know it's
yeah,
going somewhere. I don't have to know. And neither do you. It's like, we just know that like
exactly.
you and I connected just on Instagram, like, cause we became aware of each other and
Mhm.
slowly all these new doors open and people start
Mhm.
reaching out and you're like,
Mhm.
I don't know what this is, but it feels great. It
I
just feels like
really
a good flow.
I want to go back to the 20s and 30s are a wash. It's so
Yeah.
funny when you think about how much you think you know at that age and how much passion you have for everything you know. And then you get into the real ages, right? When you start hitting your upper 40s and you
Mhm.
realize how ridiculous it is in the 20s and the 30s. But every age has its purpose and its point
Yeah.
because we're learning through that. And it is all about evolving and becoming more wise and more aware of what life is truly all about. So it's funny to say that, but we all have to go through those periods. I mean, there's a lot of people in their 20s and 30s and 40s that
Mhm.
are very wise and very
Yeah.
much connected. And there are people in their 60s to 80s that are not. So we get that part of it. But yeah, 20s and 30s, when I look back at my immaturity at those two ages, it's
Wow.
rather humorous to me.
It is. And I always say, I'm so glad we didn't have Facebook or anything. I mean, I would have been, oh my God, hell on wheels. It would have been terrible. But that's if I didn't go through that then and I wouldn't, what
Yeah.
would I have learned? And that's what I
Yeah,
think
exactly.
spiritually we're actually here to do is that was my soul's path to choose that type of
Hmm.
suffering. Some people have different kinds of suffering. I
Right.
had a beautiful family. I didn't have trauma
Mhm.
growing up. I was fortunate, but I had other
Mhm.
little micro
Mhm.
traumas and I put myself through hell. And if I hadn't, I wouldn't have sought out
Mhm.
I mean, I was not a 12-step person. I was like not a joiner. This hand
Mhm.
holding and chanting, no, sorry, we don't do that. That's mortifying to me. I never thought I'd stand in
Yeah.
a room and hold hands with people,
Mm.
strangers, and do these like and say a serenity prayer together. But it really is a cliche, but it changed my life. And it's actually when I don't know if I was even agnostic. I was more atheist. I was agnostic atheist and it
Mhm.
was only when no, I think I was agnostic, but it was in choosing to believe in to accept a higher power
Mhm.
and choosing to let go of manipulating and controlling when
Mhm.
I finally said, all right, let's just act as if. What if there is a God? And what if I imagine God holding me and I'm safe and I can let go and I don't have to manipulate and control anymore and I can just sort of
Mhm.
let life happen. And suddenly
Mhm.
my life was like flowing. And I
Mhm.
went, well, maybe there's something to this. And the more I saw, one day I couldn't pay my rent. I had no rent. I had no money. I had no job. And I called someone in my program and said, I don't know what to do. And I'm trying to problem solve. And she said,
Mhm.
stop. Because I'm like, should I babysit? Should I get a job? Should I go temp? And she's like, Shh, this is what I want you to do. She said, write down all your fears on a piece of paper, put them in a God box, and just close the box and say, God, I release. I don't know what I'm going to do. I need you to help me. I'm letting go and letting you show me that you've got this. And
Mhm.
no joke, 2 days later, a friend called and said, hey, I work in casting and we're looking for musicians. And I know that you know musicians. Could you do this job? Like help us with this job? And he's like, I'll take you out to lunch. I said, no, I just like doing this. He goes, you do? Well, do you want to come work for us? And within days, I was starting work at this casting company, but I wasn't even on payroll yet. I was just sort of filling in for somebody for the day.
Mhm.
And they
Mhm.
said, hey, we've got this casting going on and they need real people. Well, since no, we don't want to ask people, can you just tweet this thing? Because they're going to choose people from tweets because we just need more people to submit. And I was like, fine. I ended up booking a national commercial that paid me $20,000 where I
Wow.
literally say one word and like blink and you'll miss me. But it was
Uh-huh.
like I asked God, show me that you've
Mhm.
got this. Like, it's like Jesus take the wheel. Well, when I did that, literally within like I went from negative bank account balance to suddenly I have a job in casting and suddenly I do this real people job where it's like I get ambushed by cameras and it's up for a product, but it's like hidden camera kind of thing. And I'm like thinking, oh, I'm going to get a few $100. And before you know it, I go to the mailbox and the checks just start rolling in. So I was
Uh-huh.
like, God just showed me that I
Mhm.
got you. I told you. You had no idea how this was going to happen. But when you just let go of it, I'm like, look what I'm going to do. And after that, I was like, all right, I'm a believer. That's,
I
and
hear people when they talk about situations like that, and they're but they always have a but to that. And I know that you did it because, and it happened because you had true belief that I am letting go, which is a lot of what we do in mediumship. We have to have that awareness and that surrender to completely let go. And that's a very difficult thing for us as human beings to do. So if you're hearing what Shannon is saying right now, what she's saying is that she completely surrendered and let go. And that's hard for us. So when you're penniless and you don't know how you're going to go forward, try doing that. That's not an easy feat.
and you nailed it. I think that's important for mediums, all mediums to
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
The My mediumship readings only started to get better. I knew this already, but saying it and doing it are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Telling yourself to let go and somehow getting in front of a stranger and feeling that performance anxiety. It's like the dream where you get up on stage and you don't know your lines every
Oh
time.
my gosh.
Every time you're like, okay, well, I have no idea what I'm even going to say. So I just have to like, do you have a grandma? Oh, okay, you do? All right. And you feel like, I don't know if this is going to work. The
Mm-hmm.
more that I just, like, even physically tell myself, just totally don't hold the breath, just let go, hunch your
Mm-hmm.
shoulders, let your gut hang out, shake your head around, and just go, all right, spirit, what do I have? And just literally pay attention to how you feel
Yeah.
and just gently let it come. It took it took a year of practice, like maybe 9 months of doing this to suddenly get to the point where every reading people are going, yes, I can
Mm-hmm.
validate that. And literally the only thing was that little mind shift. Every reading,
Yes.
I set my intention and I say, I trust you,
Mm-hmm.
spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I now ask you to please release my own judgment, ego,
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, perceptions, and replace them with yours. Let me trust you. And I say, I trust you, I trust you, I trust you. And then I go into it. I ask them for help and I just trust. And the more I just completely go, I'm giving it over, I'm giving it completely over. And whatever comes out of my mouth, I have to know is right. And the
Mm-hmm.
more I'm doing that, the more I'm just blurting stuff out. And I'm like, she's going to say no. I know this isn't. And they say yes every time. And I'm like, all right, well, then I'm starting to feel more confident now because
Right.
now
Right.
I'm like, okay, you're proving it. you're proving it every time, but how would I possibly know that? And it is so hard not to get in our heads about it.
It is very hard. And the confidence isn't about ego. The confidence is about letting go. It's
Yeah.
having that confidence that spirit's got your back
Yeah.
and that what needs to be said will come out. And there's a big difference between, and I'm not correcting you, I'm just saying for
Oh,
people
no.
that are listening to this, the
Yeah.
confidence, as I know you know this because you do it, is that spirit is going to be there. I used to get really nervous, like, I have to go do this until I realized, hold it, I'm not doing it. I have to put my body there. That's all I have to do.
Yeah.
And the confidence is coming that when you put your body there and you're using your mind to surrender, then spirit works through you. And that's the confidence is knowing that they have your back. And that's, it takes practice to do that, because when we drive that car, we're in complete control of that car. We don't think about where we're going or how we're going to maneuver or what lane we're going to change in. I mean, we do it without even thinking. And that's kind of like when we do mediumship. We show up and then spirit does the rest. It's,
Yeah.
we don't have to think about it. We don't have to worry about it. We just show up. That's the best way to come forward. So one of the questions I have for you, because I don't know how many, I know I am very unfamiliar with love addiction. What is, I know you described what your experience through love addiction.
Yeah.
Do you know what the background is to that and how people
Yeah.
would know if they had love addiction?
Yeah, there's actually I love there's a list of characteristics
Mm-hmm.
for the 12-step program, and it's like I remember going through check, 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 check. There was like one or two that weren't me. Out of 12,
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm like a 10 out of 12.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be the thing that I wanted, the reason I wanted to break the stigma about it is that when you hear, like, I remember when Tiger Woods cheated on his wife and when Halle Berry's husband, Eric Benet, cheated on her, they
Mm-hmm.
said, I'm coming out as a sex addict or love addict. And everyone was like, oh, that's just an excuse because they just want to
Mm-hmm.
cheat. And
Mm-hmm.
that sounded right. But I think that's the misconception that
Mm-hmm.
it's an excuse, because if they could feel the pain, it's a real addiction. And so the interesting thing is that it covers a lot of ground. There are people that are sex and love addicts that their thing is that they are anorexic, like in the
Mm-hmm.
set, not food wise, but
Mm-hmm.
they've cut out all contact with people because they're too afraid of intimacy. What it comes down to is it's an unhealthy relationship with intimacy and relationships. So your thing could be, there's another program which is just sex addicts, and that tends to be more of like what you hear, like the porn addicts or the whatever. Um, and then there's I think most people are love addicts, and it, of course, sex and love go hand in hand. And so, what it really is it's a lack of. It comes down to a lack of self love and needing validation from other people. It can manifest as promiscuity. It can manifest as uh, not, like I said, some people isolate. It
Mm-hmm.
manifests. There's also something that goes in there with, it's called fantasy addiction. And I always thought when people would say, I'm a fantasy addict, I pictured them playing like Dungeons and Dragons or like reading romance novels. And I realized after a few years, I'm like, I'm a fantasy addict. What it means is you get lost in your head. You can create a story about a person that you don't
Mm-hmm.
know, and you attach characteristics to them that aren't theirs. So I would see someone and go, oh, he looks like the kind of person that would be like this dreamy husband. And I'd be at home with the baby and he'd come home with his briefcase. And it's like, and you find out that guy is not even capable of a relationship, but he might look
Mm-hmm.
cute. He might have a cute little,
Mm-hmm.
adorable face. But the fantasy is giving them attributes that don't belong to them. You've
Yeah.
created a fantasy about somebody. And I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
we do, I think everyone does that at some point in their life. They
Yeah.
idealize somebody.
Absolutely.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's really about having a lack of boundaries and needing other people to make you feel okay. So
Mm-hmm.
I needed to keep intriguing with people so that they could make me feel like I was worthy and lovable, because I felt like I was still that kid. Because when I was a child, I had a large birthmark on my face, and that people would point and stare and call me ugly. So in my
Mm-hmm.
adult life, I still felt ugly. I still thought I was ugly. And now I look at pictures and I'm like, look at you, you were beautiful. And I think how sad that you
Yeah.
really thought that they
Mm-hmm.
didn't like you because there was something lacking in you, instead of realizing they just have their own they belong in the same program because
Yeah.
they're doing the dance of I want to get close. Oh, I'm scared. I want to get close. Oh, this feels uncomfortable. So it can also be love avoidance. And I learned that love addiction and love avoidance go hand in hand. Like I was a love avoidant in that I would push people away, but then I would run after the person who was running from me. And it's the whole dance, and it comes down to not wanting to be seen, not
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be vulnerable because you don't love yourself. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're dating someone and you don't like yourself, you think subconsciously your thought is, why would they be with me? There's something
Mm-hmm.
wrong with them. If they're in love with me, then there must be something defective about them. So it can be so many things. It can be infidelity, which I was guilty of, and I destroyed a marriage. I destroyed my own marriage, and I betrayed my husband. And it wasn't because of him. It was because of me. It was because I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get enough validation. I needed people to tell me I was okay, and it never was enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I needed every guy to tell me that I was attractive, and because I didn't feel like I was. So it can be so many different things, and it causes so much pain both for the person involved with you and you. But I think what people don't know is that it's a real thing. It's just the
Mm-hmm.
name I think saying you're a sex addict just trivializes something where really the pain is that I feel empty, I don't feel lovable, and I need other people to make me feel safe.
Right.
And it's there's all different reasons. I think mine was simply being sensitive and having a birthmark and
Mm-hmm.
feeling ostracized. Other people are trauma survivors. Other people had parents who were addicts, and so they learn these unhealthy. It's basically just having an unhealthy relationship with intimacy and becoming obsessed
Mm-hmm.
with people. Or there's so many ways it manifests, but it just comes down to that lack of really loving yourself and valuing yourself and having the tools to cope with anxiety because
Mm-hmm. That's big.
we reach out for
Mm-hmm.
drugs
Mm-hmm.
and alcohol, shopping,
Food,
gambling,
gambling.
cheating.
Mm-hmm.
It's all the same thing. It's all a
Yeah.
lack of love, of God love. That's
Mm-hmm.
my opinion about it is that we're lacking that connection and we're losing sight of our who we are as a soul.
Yes.
We need people and things, and it could be a job, it could be a boss telling you you're great. I needed that from everyone. I needed it from
Mm-hmm.
my friends. I needed it from, and it's such a relief to not feel that to not feel that anymore. And so it's very
Yeah.
important. Thank you for asking about it because I think it is something that's something important to
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
And the people I've met in that recovery program are some of the best people I've ever met. They're insightful, they're empaths, they're creatives, they're actors, they're musicians, they're the passionate
Mm-hmm.
ones
Mm-hmm.
because we feel so much. It's hard for us to regulate our emotions
Yeah.
in relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to regulate that. You get excited about a new relationship and suddenly it's like you're on crack. And they actually have found, well, it's that will not have found, it's pretty obvious that dopamine is released when you
Right.
are intimate. And so
Mm-hmm.
when somebody dumps you, like you know, your dopamine drops. And so it literally feels like coming off a drug. And so that's why I find it so, I'm like, you guys, there's nothing wrong with you because your
Mm-hmm.
brain secretes dopamine when you're connected. It's what babies feel,
Mm-hmm.
oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin are released when a mama holds, the baby. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you connect with somebody, and it doesn't even have to be physical, it could be just having a talk with someone and feeling really connected, you get high on it. And so
Mm-hmm.
when suddenly that's gone, you come crashing in a way that's so painful, it's hard to even describe. So, and yet I never thought there is actually a way out of it. There's actually a way to solve that pain, and it's not drugs. It's a whole process, a whole 12-step process where you have to get deep and write down your character defects and why do I have these resentments and how can I let go of this and replace it with a positive affirmation
Mm-hmm.
and be of service to other people and find self-love by being of service and finding self-esteem in acts of kindness and acts of integrity. And when I make a good choice and I don't act out, wow, I really feel proud of myself and I like myself more when I make a better choice. So there's
Yeah.
so much to it, obviously, but I thank you for being willing to explore it as well, because I just want to put that out there to anyone who either knows someone who's kind of
Mm-hmm.
I think we've all experienced it to some level.
If you think if you think that you have symptoms that feel like it resonates that you may have this, what are some avenues or books
Yeah.
or maybe ways to figure out whether this is really something that they could be affected by?
Yeah, and I know that we're not, in the program, we're not like allowed to say, I don't know what
Hmm.
the parameters are, but because they don't want it to be like a recruiting thing,
Right,
it's a
right.
voluntary thing, and it's not a
Hmm.
cult. And so I won't say the name of it, but I'll just say you can look up characteristics of sex and love addiction. I mean,
Okay.
a therapist, and I'm not saying everyone wants to go that route. I mean,
Hmm.
it felt weird to me. It ended up being the best thing that's ever
Hmm.
happened. Sometimes I just go to meetings because I just miss the people, and I feel
Hmm.
I don't even have anything to share. I just miss the camaraderie, and it's like my church.
Right,
I haven't gone in
right.
a long time, but I it's such a great support group. But
Hmm.
also there are therapists that specialize in it,
Hmm.
and there are therapists that you can talk to about it. And yeah, I say start with a therapist, and you decide if you want to do the 12-step route. I think for me it was the only way,
Hmm.
and I think most people have great success with it, but I wouldn't push that on anybody who's not comfortable. I think there are books too. There's a great book
Hmm.
called Facing Love Addiction by Pia Melody, which
Hmm.
is a fantastic book. And she's one of the leading sort of experts in the field and a therapist. And I actually know people that have been lucky enough to have her for a therapist. But that book to me, I was like, oh, this book is about me. It's You just look at it and you're like, oh, this is the pattern. And it's funny how psychological it all is and how it's textbook. It's textbook.
Hmm.
Humans respond the same in just such predictable ways when they're in pain. So,
Yeah, I'm thinking how many of us that don't really put ourselves first or don't really love ourselves would be on maybe a spectrum to that, or even reading that book would be helpful just to learn how to have self acceptance. Because I know for me, it's been a journey to come back to loving myself. And there's still times where I have all of that self loathing, like I'm not good enough, or all the things that we go through. Um, it, I know that uh, I guess what am I saying? I think that is there a spectrum that you can be like almost on there, and that book would still help with maybe
yeah,
giving more clarity to self love.
I think so. In fact, I always said, first of all, I mean, sometimes people just have that one relationship that just gets it.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
Lloyd Dobler in Say Anything, like that one where you're like gonna stand out there with the boombox over your head, the one that you just can't get over. And also when you're
Yeah.
young, your first relationships are so intense because you've
Hmm.
never felt that
Hmm.
feeling before. And
Hmm.
it's like so dramatic. And so I think we've all kind of had that feeling of like desperate love, unless you're a
Hmm.
sociopath or something. But
Hmm.
and I think that yes, because I think it also can help you learn healthy boundaries with,
Yeah.
okay, and learn ways to basically learn healthy boundaries and make good choices when it comes to dating. And
Hmm.
then even just some dating experts kind of I
Hmm.
followed. Rory Ray was one of them. And actually my current, my boyfriend I've been with for 8 years, he goes, there's a reason why I had been dating a lot of people at the same time, but I chose you. He said, because you're the only one who kind of did it right. And I was like, oh my God, that's hilarious. And it was because I followed Rory Ray, and she said things like what to do when they pull away. Don't
Hmm.
go get desperate and freak out.
Hmm.
Lean
Hmm.
back. Don't act on your feelings. Feelings aren't facts. That's my favorite 12 step, like, kind of thing. It's just because you
I
feel it
love
doesn't
that.
mean it's true. So feelings
Hmm.
aren't facts. You might feel all this stuff, but you need to learn to sit on your hands and ask for your needs to be met, but not in a very rational way and at the right time,
Hmm.
and say, hey, listen, this isn't working for me. So, but yeah, I think anyone can. And in fact, I always said, I think everyone can benefit from doing the 12-step
Hmm.
process. Everyone, for not even addiction. And one of my guests on my show, Josh Lewis, of Hope Paranormal, actually mentions it in my show that he
Hmm.
started a sort of a 12-step called like Life Anonymous. And I was
Hmm.
like, that was something I thought of years ago. Why don't we have a 12-step program just for people to better them?
Hmm.
Just to kind of, everyone has trauma. Every single human being has had something
Hmm.
traumatic happen to them that changed the way they saw themselves. We all struggle with insecurities. We all have moments of low self esteem. We've all messed up in a relationship. And I think kind of it's almost like cleansing and clearing out the clutter and having a sponsor to sit across from and it's almost like it's like free therapy, which was actually the only reason I did it at the
Mhm.
time. It's
Mhm.
like it's free. I have a sponsor that I like, and she sits with me every week, and we hash it out, and we go through all my
Mhm.
steps together. So I think
Mhm.
anyone can benefit, and I think it's good to at least look at the characteristics. You may not be an addict, but
Mhm.
you might have some addictive tendencies in
Yeah.
relationships. And I have
I
friends
would
like
think
that.
that in general that we would, especially people that are very sensitive and didn't really learn how to monitor that or be able to
Yeah.
regulate that, and how we are very much affected from rejection or from being judged. Where a lot of people would just kind of let it roll off their back. So I feel like that it seems to me that it would be very beneficial for almost anybody to read,
Yeah, I
especially
really
women in
appreciate
our
that.
time.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I hope,
Yeah.
it reaches the right person. Even
Hmm.
if it's one person, I needed to hear that long ago.
I, I I haven't heard of it until now. And I'm
Yeah.
sure I could probably fall into that spectrum just by the way that I've reacted to
Yeah.
some situations in my life that I should have handled much better. Now I would handle it better, but when I was younger, I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the tools. I really felt more of the desperation versus my power, which is something
Hmm.
that you learn, I think, when you start connecting to the spiritual world and connecting to what you were calling your higher self, right? Remembering who we are. And then that's when you start developing that more powerful part of you where you can stand on your own and say, no, I have to be, myself. I have to do what is right for me.
Yeah.
It
And at
takes a
this
lot.
point, I'm so happy in myself. I'm not saying I couldn't be
Hmm.
rattled again.
Hmm.
When you recover, they always say, don't think you're out of the woods. I mean, just because,
Yeah.
how do I know? I've been in a relationship for 8 years. I like to think I know I have no desire to ever
Hmm.
act out again or
Hmm.
demean myself. And even if I ended up single again, I would never just start dating someone without, I would want, it's like there's no way that I would ever have casual sex. I wouldn't need to get to know somebody. I have no interest. I don't
Hmm.
need the validation anymore. And in fact, I wouldn't even date. Honestly, if this were my last relationship, I probably wouldn't seek it out. I mean, I would go out and I'd meet people, and if it happened, I would not be I would sit I would be happy with my cats. I would
Hmm.
be perfectly happy with my God, with my meditation, with spirit world, with my friends. I literally would be fine. I mean, obviously we get lonely sometimes, but I'm so happy right now that I just don't really feel the need. I don't need validation. I don't, you should see what I wear every day. Not just in COVID. I look like a bag lady. It's like I don't even, I don't wear heels anymore. I don't, I care, but I don't.
No, I get it.
I am the definite go to the grocery store in mismatched leggings and mismatched shoes and some random sweater I pulled out of the closet with my hair in a bun. And I'm like
Oh,
hoping you don't run into your ex-boyfriend there, which I think has happened to me. I think that did happen to me once, or I don't know if it happened to me or someone else. I don't remember, but I have that feeling of remembering kind of going, oh great, this is the day that I run into my ex, and it's like but I just don't care anymore. I'm like, whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I think you get to that point when, and in fact, over the past couple of days, this particular conversation has come up. I don't know how many times. Clearly, there's a message here for me, but I'm very happy where I'm at. I don't feel like I need anybody. I feel like, I'm happy being by myself. I'm happy living my life. It's not about not being hassled or inconvenienced. It's about just getting to know who I am and being able to make choices for myself and do what I want to do and not have to worry about what I'm wearing or did I do something and all those things. I mean, if it happens at some point in time, that's one thing. But now I've never had that kind of time in my life. This is the first time in my older years where I've had that period where I just get to do what I want to do. And I don't
Mhm.
mean it and I get to be selfish. It's like, what do I'm learning what I really want to do, what's really important to me. And that's important to be able to give yourself the freedom to know because we often don't know that
Yeah,
very
I love
often.
that. I definitely do.
Sue asked if you could put in the name of the books and the experts that you had referenced so she
Mhm.
could look them up after
Yeah,
this in the comments. That would be great.
thank you for asking.
So, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time. It's been a great conversation.
Thank thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you kind of just letting me be me and letting it go where it went. And I'm
Yeah.
really excited because I'm actually having you on my podcast.
Uh-huh.
What day is
Couple
it?
weeks.
This
The
something.
10th,
Well,
I
we'll
think.
we'll announce it. I
It's
think
on my
we'll have to
calendar.
look at our calendars. But yeah, I'm
It's
excited
coming
to
up.
hear about your journey as well. So I'm
Yeah.
very, very grateful and thank you so much for this beautiful conversation.
And everybody's been so quiet this whole time. We only got that one question. Usually there's questions coming in. Everybody was quiet.
And we also came on so late, but yeah, thank you, Sue.
Yeah, we did have the numbers were a little low. Well, thank you, and everybody. I hope that you were able to gain information and knowledge through this conversation. It's been very, I think, very insightful for me, and really to contemplate. What is your next step in life, and where do you want to go? And don't worry about it, but allow and follow. I think the breadcrumbs, right, to where the direction is that you're going. You're very welcome, Sue. Thank you, Pam. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Thank you,
Um,
Pam.
so thank you so much. Thank you, Marianne. Now they're chatting.
Oh, hi, Mary.
We lit their lights again. All right. Thank you so much. So if you have any questions, comments, please put it in the chat, and I'll make sure that Shannon gets it if you have questions for her. And I'll answer questions as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.